Henry, who came from Manchester. They were fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, in that the RSM, John Grieve, was also not from the far north. It was fortunate in that he liked them, but that also made it unfortunate, for he gave them no leeway whatsoever. He expected them to perform better than the rest of the squadron, and he drove them both hard. That was life in the cavalry. The two men were part of a famous regiment, but that was broken down into squadrons and then troops. Now that they were on active service, it was also broken down into tent mates, messmates, they called each other, like the sailors on the ships that had brought them halfway around the world to the Black Sea. There were two kinds of cavalry. There were the light cavalrymen, the lancers, and the flamboyantly dressed hussars wearing braided pelisse and dolmans. They were the peacocks. Henry and Taff belonged to the heavies. The Scots Greys apart, the heavy cavalry wore metal helmets. They carried long, straight swords capable of taking off an arm, and they knew how to wield them. The regiments in the Crimea were the wild Inniskillings, fierce Irishmen known for their ability to fight, and the Royals, the household cavalry. They were the ones who guarded Buckingham Palace and Windsor. They were the Queen's Guards. The two cavalry arms had little time for one another. The light cavalrymen were, in the opinion of the heavy cavalry, too showy and flamboyant. The heavy cavalry saw themselves as the descendants of the knights of old. Certainly their new swords were longer, straighter and heavier than the flashy sabres of the light cavalry. They had landed in the exotic land of the Crimea and then spent time helping their animals to recover from the long and grueling sea voyage. If they thought they would be sent to battle immediately, then they were wrong. The infantry had fought battles almost from the moment that they landed, but the cavalry, that most valuable of arms, had merely been spectators. It seemed they were too valuable to waste. With the war almost over, it seemed that the cavalry would have sailed halfway around the world, and for nothing. Up till now, the war for the light and heavy brigades of cavalry had been a series of patrols and vedette duty, but on that October morning, with the army close to Sevastopol and the town of Balaclava, the bugler's call was more urgent. The Russians were attacking. Taff and Henry knew what to do, and they prepared for war. Some of the equipment, like the sabretache, was archaic, but the troopers understood the need for tradition. Taff carried his bearskin to the horse lines, as donning the headgear would be the last thing he would do. He had much to do to ensure that Caesar was also ready for war. Taff and his horse, Caesar, were a good combination. The horse, named by the troop commander, Captain Polaine, was one of the larger horses in the regiment, but Taff was a good rider and could handle the powerful beast. There was no reason why he should have been, as the only soldiers in the family had joined the 24th Foot, but as well as having a natural affinity for horses, Taff also had natural ability. Others had tried to ride Caesar, but failed. Private Thomas made it look easy. He slipped the gnarled apple he had found into Caesar's mouth as he saddled him. "There might be a little action today, Caesar. Now remember that while you might be the best horse in the regiment, you needn't show it. Just stay in line, see? No need to get ahead of the others." The horse whinnied, and Henry Ramage shook his head as he too prepared his horse. It was as though the two could talk to each other. "How do you do that, Taff?" "Do what?" "Talk to your horse and he answers you." Taff shrugged. "Dunno, I just do." RSM Grieve's voice boomed out. "Less chit-chat, ladies. It looks like the day we might actually get to see some action. We want to show the rest of the Heavy Brigade that we are the best regiment Lord Raglan has. He will be looking on from the heights. There are some Russian cavalry regiments forming up, and they are threatening our guns, so look lively, eh?" There were two valleys before them, and the British High Command was on the heights overlooking the two valleys. They afforded a fine view, and they could see the British and French redoubts that were there to discourage Russian attacks. They could see that the Russians had launched an early attack and were attempting to take the guns from the redoubts. The Allies had been caught napping. The two men did as they were ordered and finished preparing their mounts. The last thing that they donned was the bearskin they wore. Neither man was confident.